Hello and welcome back to the Card Pool. I'm your host, Stu.
And I'm Kyle. Once again, we are coming to you through the miracle of video conferencing and social media in the midst of this quarantine age.
AKA the magic of the internet.
Yes.
And so today we have a magic moment coming at you, and this one is due to Ikora or however you pronounce that set coming
I'm pretty sure it's Ikoria, dude.
Whatever, the eye set. Pretty much, with the reveal of that set, we now see the access to another 3-drop mana rock. And this one are the cycling ones that are in the tricolored of the Consitar here cons, which is pretty awesome. So we're wondering, exactly, well, how does this relate to other 3-drop mana rocks? And should these actually be able to fit into your deck at all? So what Kyle and I went ahead is we made our own list of the top 5, our individual top 5 mana rocks that are 3-drops. And obviously we're going to have different views on this. We're going to have different opinions, but we're going to dive into it and see exactly what we have to show you.
Yeah, and I think some of these may look pretty familiar, others may not. But let's start off with, I think, Stu's number 5 pick here. So, yeah, kick it off. Let's do it.
All right, so my number 5 is actually from a more recent set that we touched upon in Kamigawa. It's called Honor-Worn Chakra, I think. So these are all going to be 3-drop mana rocks, so we're not going to say much about that. But again, artifact, it goes ahead and taps 1 generic, and if you go ahead and you tap an untapped legendary permanent, you can go ahead and untap this, which inherently means you can get another use and create more mana. So this is really good for the fact that you can go ahead and, like I said, get more mana. And ever since Wizards went ahead and errated Planeswalkers to all being legendary permanents, you can go ahead and utilize them in a whole other way besides just using loyalty abilities. If you go ahead and you tap them, inherently you can go ahead and produce more mana. Also, this works with anything else that's on the board. A commander that has summoning sickness that you can't use, or even a land that's somehow dormant. Like, I mean, if you have a tabernacle, you can't use it for much beyond just a board presence, but now you can go ahead and tap this and get mana with it.
Yeah, and like you said, Stu, legendary creatures, legendary, enchantments and artifacts. There are even legendary equipments now, so being able to tap those for mana is pretty nice. I don't love the fact that this just gives colorless, but it has very interesting, like you said, catch to be able to use itself multiple times in a turn. I'm not really sure what deck needs this. Maybe outside of a Super Friends deck might like the access to...
That's what I was going to say there, yeah.
But those are usually multiple colors, so colorless mana doesn't really help that much, in theory. Maybe, though. This is a very interesting one, and certainly one that I think doesn't get a whole lot of press. Maybe it should.
I think it should. Well, also, there are decks that care about legendary permanents. Captain Sisei is one, and we are seeing legendary tutors being more constant in white now, so it is becoming a little bit more relevant. And we also do have legendary tokens that get produced with one of the Missa Planeswalkers. So, I mean, more things end up being legendary than you think just because of just flavor text or how it goes with the lore. So sometimes it's pretty awesome for that. And like we said, you get more bang for your buck. But I don't have too much more. What's up?
I said, indeed you do. So, going on to my number 5 here?
Yep, you're number 5, Kyle. What are you throwing at us?
All right. Well, this time I have Spectral Searchlight here, which, again, won't go too much over the details of the actual card because they're all very similar. But this one taps to choose a player, and that player adds 1 mana of any color they choose. So, I think I've probably been over these kinds of things before. Normally, I'm not all about things that are about giving other players an advantage. However, I just really thought that this card was worth a shout-out because out of all the 3-drop mana rocks, this is the only one that allows you to give mana to other people. I mean, have you ever been sitting at a table in a multiplayer game where you're sitting there and you can't do anything to stop yourself from dying or losing control of the situation, and the person next to you is like, oh, if only I had 1 more mana. And then when you have this, you're like, well, how about I give you that 1 more mana? I mean, I've been in so many of those situations, and having this card around, even though a lot of the time it's just a worse Darksteel Ingot, doesn't really do anything, just that 1% of the time where it might do something is worth thinking about at least.
I agree. I mean, there's many times where I've gotten mana screwed, where it's like, I don't have any white mana, or I don't have any red mana. And just by having this card out, you can be an ally to anyone. Nobody's really going to try to piss you off or attack you for no reason or remove some of your permanents. And actually, in fact, this will stay around pretty much most of the game, provided nobody wants to be that guy. And it works great in other formats, such as like Two-Headed Giant or any kind of other like political type gameplays. And honestly, Commander is all about political gameplay. So this is a great political card. It produces any color of mana for that player of that choice. It's just great. Like Send Triplets is a tri-colored deck, but it wants to play 5-colored. You can go ahead and make it so you have access to that and now have an ally. So it's a really awesome, fun card. And if you play Kingdoms or anything else like that, this is also another card where like you'll see people be like, all right, all Darksteel ingots in your decks are now this card, just as like a rule errata kind of thing. Like people will play around with that.
And if you like Two-Headed Giant, I mean, this is your card. Teamwork makes the dream work. So who knows? Maybe you'll like it. Maybe you don't.
That's an A-team right there. Well, moving on to my number 4, Kyle, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Now, this one is called Cultivators Caravan. Now, this artifact is a vehicle, which is pretty cool. You might know this mechanic. So this can go ahead and tap to produce one of any color mana. Like we said, it's a mana rock. But it has the crew ability for 3, in which you can go ahead and tap any number of creatures you control that have a combined power of 3 or more to make this vehicle into an artifact creature until the end of the turn. And then while it's a creature, it is a 5/5 body. So this is something where it's like late game, mana rocks kind of don't matter too much because you don't need any more mana. You have everything you can cast. You might not have card value. You might not have a field presence. Well, this goes ahead and makes it so that you have a field presence and are able to grow your mana at the same time. You can go ahead and crew this with creatures that have Summoning Sickness. Or if your commander is something, we'll use Send Triplets again, that's got a 3/3 body, you can go ahead and tap this commander who never attacks, never blocks, and make it so you have a threatening body on the field.
Well, you are right, Stu. I mean, this is pretty interesting. Overall, sort of uninspiring still because it just taps to give you 1 mana of any color, and that's that's really all there is to it. But the idea that it can become a big creature at a moment's notice is pretty good and does make it a lot better, like you said, later in the game when just having an ingot in play doesn't really matter all that much. I wouldn't necessarily play it unless this were in some kind of deck where maybe vehicles mattered or maybe artifacts or creatures maybe mattered more for whatever reason. So it depends where you would fit this in. The crew cost is a little bit high to me. Like, if it were crew 2, awesome. Crew 3 is like a little bit difficult to reach sometimes. But still, this is a pretty cool option. Definitely one of the better vehicles we've ever gotten.
Oh, definitely one of the better vehicles. Maybe Smuggler's Copters. I still think the creme de la creme out there for that. But, I mean, this is something that just kind of... It doesn't have to become a creature, though. It disincentivizes people from attacking you because they're like, all right, well, you know, you have a 1/1 token you just created, plus this thing came out. Like, it's not too hard to get 3 power if you think about it. Most decks are either going for some sort of theme. The only decks it wouldn't really fit in is something like a Storm deck, which doesn't really use creature permanents. It cares all about spell slinging. So, like, this can be able to be utilized in any kind of deck, a rune deck, or like any commander that has power 3, it's viable in for that reason. And if any commander isn't, like Reese the Redeemed, inherently it creates tokens, which can get up to 3 power pretty easily as well. So as long as you care about creatures, it's not too hard to get that body out there. And again, it makes you more of a threat in a different way. Like, this isn't a creature unless you want it to be. So if somebody goes ahead and board wipes, you inherently still have a creature that you can have an ace in the hole for. So it has a whole bunch of different interactions, whereas just a mana rock wouldn't.
It's also always fun to use something like this with something like a Memnarch or a Karn, basically that can turn it into a creature on its own. Those are always fun. Yeah,
those are always good too. But that's enough what I got to say for this one, Kyle. What do you got next on your list?
All right. Well, my number 4 is going from group love to group hate. So for my next one, it's Cryptolith Fragment. Now, this one comes into play tapped, unlike some of the other ones we've already seen. So you can't use it the turn you play it. However, you can tap it to get 1 mana of any color, and each player, not just other opponents, but yourself as well, each player loses 1 life. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, if each player has 10 or less life, Cryptolith Fragment transforms into a creature called Aurora of Emrakul, which is a 1/4 flying death touch that whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 3 life. So it's really interesting. Very, very interesting card here. And one of the things that I love about it in terms of group pain is that this is ideal for my Neheb the Eternal deck. Cares about everybody losing life every turn. So this not only gives you mana, but gives you even more mana. And I know there are a lot of other decks like that where cards exist that feed off of other people losing life.
Yeah, well, another great commander that you usually see this home in is like Rakdos, Lord of Riots, where it's like you can't cast the commander unless a player has lost life that turn. So being able to use this as a mana rock to both create mana and enable your commander to come into play is useful for that. The flip side of this card isn't necessarily relevant most of the time because it's very timey-wimey for that to work out. However, being able to make everyone's life total drop down at a quicker rate is something advantageous, and you are getting 1 mana of any color for this. So inherently, it's kind of like a pain land that's collectively being a pain for everyone, and that's just good flair right there.
And also, once it flips, I don't mean to interrupt, but also once it flips, it only flips if people are at 10 or less life. When it starts swinging and draining everyone for 3 every time, that's going to end the game awfully fast. People are already at 10 life.
True, but I mean, if you take it just for the mana rock side here, there are other things out there to go ahead and deal extra damage, like damage doublers if you're in red. Like, go ahead and play a Furnace Pits of Wrath, and then now everyone's getting hit even faster. So this will be great, not only in like a Neheb deck or like a Rakdos deck, but you could even put this in like a Heartless Hitagetsu one, which you're just all about draining life down as fast as possible. So it's something that's really interesting just for the fact, well, there's not really any 3-drop mana rocks besides this one that does this kind of effect.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the last one in that it changes into a creature, but there's not a whole lot of them that actually do that. There are some, but not many. And to answer everybody's question that I'm sure is on everybody's minds, yes, I have won the game by transforming this thing and attacking.
That's a whole other level right there. But moving on to my next one, number 3. Now, this is an old school card, got reprinted, everyone was so happy. It's called Coalition Relic. Now, it has the effect that we all know. You can go ahead, you tap this, produce 1 mana of any color. However, you can also go ahead and tap this to put a charge counter on this. And if you do, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all charge counters from this card and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool for each charge counter removed this way. So inherently, what this does is it nets you an additional mana for the following turn, provided this card is still out. You go ahead, you're like, all right, I have all the mana I need, or I'll hold up some mana for a counterspell. But if you never need the counterspell, that mana just kind of goes away. So you can now go ahead, bank that mana for next turn, and now your cap goes up by an additional 1, excluding a land drop, of course. So this is a great card just in, again, getting more mana. It gets you more mana than you would typically get from just a regular 3-drop mana rock.
Yeah, this card is interesting to me because originally when I started playing Commander years ago, this used to be like the mana rock. Like this was the one that everybody had to have for no other reason other than it could potentially produce 2 mana for the price of 1, essentially, if you timed it correctly. It got even better relatively recently with all the Proliferate cards that are running around now. However, like I said, it does kind of put a time limit on itself. So it's not something that you can just keep tapping and charging up and charging up and charging up. It does kind of have an expiration on it. And that's something that sort of holds it back to me. However, like I said, if you time it correctly, it can give you 2 mana. And for a 3-drop mana rock, that's pretty good rate.
Yeah, and then also there are commanders out there that do care about banking your mana for later. You have Crewfix, you have Omnath, OG Green Omnath, where inherently you are banking that mana for later. So if you're doing that, proliferating with a Super Friends kind of build, you might get up to 3 mana, 4 mana, depending on exactly how you're doing it. So it does have room. It does work for certain tech builds better than others, but this is just an all-around great card for any deck that's trying to produce additional mana.
Agreed. Well, I think we've kind of address this one, we want to move on to number 3 here.
Yeah, you got it, dude. Your card.
All right. Well, number 3 for me is Unstable Obelisk. So this one, bless you, Stu, is a mana rock that taps to give you 1 colorless and has the added ability of tapping itself for 7 additional mana to sacrifice it and destroy target permanent. So this one ranks lower on the list for me than some because I think it only really belongs in, with rare exceptions, a monocolor deck. Monocolor decks are, generally speaking, kind of weak on some different forms of removal, and this one can basically take out any problem permanent, whether it be a land, a creature, an enchantment, whatever it is that's giving you problems. This card can get rid of it while also boosting your mana. So I think this is just a really cool option to have and should be a staple for monocolor decks and maybe others outside of that too. It depends on what you need.
I agree with you. I mean, you can use it wherever you'd like, honestly. But it's pretty much the mana rock version of Meteor Golem. However, you don't need to go ahead and have an ETB trigger for this. You can save this for whenever you want, which is a great thing to have in your back pocket. And like you're saying, depending on what kind of deck color you're using, you kind of lack certain types of spot removal. Like black has a hard time getting rid of enchantments, and like other colors have trouble getting rid of lands or planeswalkers or any other thing that's in between there. So being able to have a ace in the hole, being able to get rid of any permanent, like this is almost a beast within as a mana rock. It costs you a lot of mana to do it. However, if you're going to lose the game and you can't get rid of it any other way, yeah, I'll pay 7 mana and sack a rock so I can go ahead and take this player out of the game. Like, being able to get rid of a Blood Moon you're having problems with, this is huge.
Yeah, I can't count the number of times that I've been able to use this to get rid of something, and I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise, given the kind of deck that I'm playing. Like you said, Stu, mono black can't get rid of, like, enchantments, barely artifacts. Or mono blue basically can't get rid of anything permanently most of the time. So having this in the arsenal for any of those decks definitely gives you just one more tool that you can use in order to get out of some really tricky situations.
And also, sometimes you forget about certain types of removal when you're making decks, or like the card that does the removal you want is super expensive. I've played against many people who are all about attacking, but when Glacial Chasm hits, they're like, I don't have any response to this. I have to attack to get rid of this. So it kind of gets you safe by running this card, because it makes it so if you forget something or you don't know a card exists, like there's so many cards out there, it's easy to know one doesn't exist. This is kind of your plan B, your Alamo, more or less, to be able to, hey, I don't lose, I have a chance, I just got to get to that 7 mana cap and I'll be fine. But moving on to my number 2. Now, this is a classic card in Commander, and it even has the name. It is Commander's Sphere. Now, this is a card that is no stranger to most decks. It is a solid piece. It goes ahead and produces 1 mana of any color in your commander's identity, but it has the added caveat of being able to sacrifice this card to draw a card. So, why is this good? Well, like we're saying with all these 3 drops, you can either produce colorless mana or any color of mana, which is awesome. But being able to sack this to draw a card is really good. Like I said before, mana rocks inherently can be dead late in the game, or they get spot removal, which feels bad. This can go ahead and sack itself and be able to net you something. But it doesn't even have to tap to do it, and that's the strongest thing that's about this. It's a free sack outlet on an artifact that draws you a card. This is abusable for other certain kinds of combos, where you can go ahead, you sack an artifact, something happens, you return it from the grave. There's tons of artifact builds that like abuse cards that have their own self-sack outlets, and this is no stranger to it. This is just a great card, and being an OG to Commander for us, it's definitely one to know of. Most people do know of it, but I had to give it a shout-out just for the infamy of it.
Well, the great thing about this is that unlike a mana rock that draws you cards like Mind Stone or Hedron Archive, for example, where you have to choose between making mana or getting rid of it to draw some cards, you can't have both. This one lets you have both. You can tap it, float whatever mana you want, and then sacrifice it, draw a card, and maybe you can play something more? I don't know, but like you said, recursion, excellent with this card. You can just keep drawing cards, and in decks that don't necessarily have access to drawing a lot of cards or color combinations that may not have as much card advantage as others, this is a great, great tool to have around. And having access to any color of your commander basically means any color most of the time. So this is just all around fantastic card, and definitely would be my number 2 if we weren't on purpose trying to choose different cards. So
That's fair. And my favorite little cantrip of this is just this and Sun Titan. It just feels good. You go ahead, you attack, you get this guy into play, it produces mana for your main phase 2 to do whatever. You draw an additional card, go to your next combat, do it again. It costs you nothing, you're gaining so much from it, and it feels good. It really does. But moving on to your number 2, Kyle, what do you got flying at us?
All right, well, this one is pretty similar, but it has a little bit different twist on it. My number 2 is Mana Geode. And this one is another artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. But instead of drawing you a card, when this one enters the battlefield, you scry 1. So, I don't know. I think like a legitimate argument could maybe be made as to which one is better. Personally, I prefer Commander's Sphere, and I think probably a lot of people would be in that same boat. But Mana Geode is relatively new, and it's one of those cards that I look at every time. I'm like, maybe this makes the cut every single time I make a deck. Like, it's just scrying, as history has proven with scry lands and a bunch of other cards that just incidentally scry, is such an amazing mechanic and is a great one to have access to in pretty much any color or combination that you want. So it's not as good as drawing a card probably in most of the cases, but it's almost as good as drawing a card. Being able to look at your top card, get rid of it, keep it, can make a big difference.
Well, it's really good, especially for top deck matters. Like, we're talking about newer cards, Bolus the Citadel. It's so great having that card out, but when you hit that one land you can't get through, you're stuck. Well, this can go ahead, you cast this, you get rid of that problem. Or if you're using a Narset deck or a Golos deck, being able to have like a little bit of an idea of what you're going into is a big deal. And there's so many decks that care about the top card. So being able to interact with that is great. But you can recur this card and get this effect multiple times. If you're using like Virago to go ahead and recur the ETB, like, yeah, I'll take a free scry and an additional mana every turn. Thank you very much. And then we'll go on to another round of happiness. You know, it's just a great card.
That's something Commander's Sphere can't do. It has to sacrifice itself to get any value, whereas this just has to enter the battlefield. I mean, you could argue which of those is superior, but it certainly has its uses for sure.
Actually, we'll do a little poll real fast. I can't point to the little blip perfectly above me, but we'll say, hey, which one would you rather use, Mana Geode or Commander's Sphere? So let us know. But until we find out those results, we'll keep on going down to our number 1s.
All right.
My number 1, I have to give this a shout out. This has to be on any list that's about mana rocks. It's Basalt Monolith. Now, Basalt Monolith doesn't untap door on your untapped step, but you can go ahead and tap this to produce 3 generic mana. However, it does take 3 generic mana to go ahead and untap Basalt Monolith. So right off the bat, you're like, I'm netting nothing. And inherently, if you just start playing Magic, it's a safe assumption right there. But that's not how this card actually works. This card is very abusable for a lot of players who played for a long time and know a good bit about how the stack works or infinite combos, how much mana you can truly get out of this card. Because this is a combo piece for getting infinite generic mana.
Yes, I mean, there are a number of combinations where if you just somehow enable this card to make a little bit more than it normally would, if it taps for like 4 mana, add an additional 1 instead of the 3 that it normally makes, it suddenly becomes, tap, make 4, and then 3 to untap it. So you're basically, by doing nothing, making 1 additional mana there every time you do it. So it just multiplies and multiplies from there, obviously. One of my favorite things to do with this card is that because it can just tap and untap itself infinitely, it gives you infinite self-mill with something like Mesmeric Orb, which some decks definitely can make use of.
Yeah, it's like a Laboratory Maniac win right there. But also, like, this card's only gotten more and more usability for infinite combos as time's progressed. One of the newest cards that is, like, partners in crime with this is Nyx Bloom Ancient. You go ahead, any permanent produces 3 times the amount of what it would. So you tap this for 9 mana, you use 3 of that 9, bringing you down to 6 to untap it, and you keep it going. So pretty much you just tap for 6, tap for 6, tap for 6, and it just goes like crazy. And
Yeah.
the more you go down this rabbit hole, the more you can actually find out, like, hey, this commander could go with this, or this enchantment goes with this. It's just so powerful. Like, it's really unbelievable if you would never use this card before.
And like, even if you're not trying to really abuse it for anything, being able to play this out on like turn 3, let's say, and you've done nothing else, you play this out. Then on turn 4, you have access to at minimum 6 mana, maybe 7 if you play another land and haven't done anything else even. That's pretty amazing. Like that's a huge boost in mana. And maybe that's all you need. Maybe one time playing something big off the curve is all you need. And then you can worry about untapping this later. It's just that one-shot casting, like a giant Eldrazi creature from your hand or something, that's going to make the difference in the game. So just being able to play this and use it once is pretty great by itself.
And also, you don't even have to inherently use mana to go ahead and untap this. Something like a Seedborn Muse will go ahead and make it so you don't have to worry about the little caveat tapped onto this as well. You just get it untapped for you. You don't have to even use it on enemy turns. You can just wait and have like a casual game. Now, that's a non-degenerate way of doing it, and those do exist. But if you want to go ahead and just abuse the heck out of this, you can, and it feels great. But moving on to your number 1, Kyle, what is your creme de la creme?
All right. Well, of course, I think that everybody saw this one coming. Number 1 on our list here is Chromatic Lantern. Now, I'm sure everybody knows this card at this point, but it taps to view mana of any color and also gives all lands you control the ability to tap and add 1 mana of any color on their own. So maybe somebody will argue this with me, but I don't really think anybody can. This is the undisputed champion of the 3-drop mana rocks, because not only does it give you anything you want, it gives all your lands the ability to give you anything you want, including those lands that don't actually give mana, like Maze of Ith and Glacial Chasm and all that stuff. You could use this in pretty much any deck if you wanted to, but I usually stick to playing it in a deck that has 3 or more colors, just because I don't want to shell out like $10 every time I want to build a new deck. But yeah, certainly certain 2-color decks can use this for mana fixing as well. But like I said, I tend to do it a little with like 3 or more colors is when I call for this card. But yeah, this is a great fixing tool and probably the best we have access to in the game, honestly.
Yeah, this is pretty much the poster child of multicolored mana 3-drop rocks right there. You definitely have seen this card across the board. And the reason why this card is so great, like you said, for fixing the mana, typically that's just in green. You see Prismatic Omen or Joiner Adept having these effects, and being able to give that to, like, Izzet, or being able to give it to Dimir or Temur or anything else. Well, Temur has green, but you get my point. Pretty much being able to have an effect that's typically just in the green roundhouse is a great effect, especially if you don't use any green. And this card literally has been reprinted so many times. It's been in Commander supplemental sets. It's been, was it Ravnica? Guilds of Ravnica was the newest one, and that was also in that one too. People love this card. People play this card. People know this card. And the reason for it, it's a great card. Now, I don't know if Basalt Monolith versus this, which one's better, because one can go infinite versus the other one, which is, you know, just a great value card. I mean, we could do a second poll. I don't know. We could try doing that. Which one would you rather, a Chromatic Lantern or a Basalt Monolith? We'll do one more real fast, see how that turns out. I would love to see people explain that one, but I don't have anything else to say about this card, Kyle. Do you?
No, it's just great. Well, that about does it for this week, but of course you can follow us on any one of our various social media channels. You can find us on Tapped Out, where we keep all our deck lists. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, we've also set up a space on Reddit now. I gather we have our own subreddit, right, Stu?
We do, and they're all at the panhandle TheCardPool. So be sure to check them out. You can reach us in any way, and you can let us know anything pretty much that's on your mind. And
we're
we also have...
Yeah, I was about to say that. We're sponsored by TCG Player.
Yeah, we got our own affiliate link, so check out it in the description below. If you got a shopping cart you're ready to check out with, click on it beforehand and lets TCG Player know that, hey, you like what we do. They take note and they help support the channel, which is pretty awesome. So until then, I'm Stu.
And I'm Kyle.
And we'll see you
we'll
next
see
time
you next time
at the card.
Pool.
We'll get it.
We're just messing with you now.
That was your fault.